Here we
Love
go.
Dr. Mike.
What's that?
I love Dr. Mike. He's funny.
Oh, right. I think it. But are you talking about the Instagram guy, or it's this one? It's this one here. He's like, I think it's Dr. I might. I'm wondering now. When I heard it out loud, I'm thinking it might be the wrong one. Let's see here. The science of hypertrophy. I think it's Dr. Mike, right? Is his name? Dr. Matt and Dr. Mike. Whoops. So are you talking? You're talking about the dude the guy with like the really well coiffed hair, right?
Yeah, we're talking about different ones. Never
I
mind.
do. Yeah, I like that guy as well. This guy is great. Yeah, this guy is awesome. Um, this one's a doctor of physiology, not an actual medical doctor.
Okay.
If you ever want, by the way, if you like that guy and you guys want like a really good time of having a doctor explain things, a lot of people don't know this, but Ken Jeong is a doctor. Um, so he's a doctor, the guy from The Hangover and Community. Like that was his profession before he got into acting. So for a little while, they had the internet like ask him medical questions, and he breaks them down really well. Like he's a really good teacher. So it's very funny to see, but he's still like very sarcastic and kind of mean, and they're really great videos. I definitely recommend watching them. I would totally do one in class if any of them were relevant to us, but they never are. um, so, morning, Kelvin. Hi. um,
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. All right, let's go ahead and break down training the muscular system, right? So we want to talk about the basic principles of developing our muscular system. So we are going to talk about how to build muscle today, but more than just how to build it, how to train it, which means we also have to talk about flexibility. We need to talk about like endurance versus power versus strength versus size, right? These are all kind of different but intertwined concepts. We want to talk about the 4 different methods that we use to measure strength, although, to be honest, in the gym, we're probably just going to use one. Variable resistance training and how that can be kind of cool. The difference between hypertrophy and hyperplasia, I will mention briefly. It's not super relevant to us because we don't really do hyperplasia directly. Hyperplasia is actually making new muscle cells. That's not really our goal, believe it or not. Our goal is simply to make the muscle cells that we have bigger. We will talk about muscle soreness, which is great because I am in the 7th circle of that today. And talk about our cardiorespiratory adaptations, flexibility adaptations, as well. So, if we are talking about this idea of strength, right? If we give it a definition, right? What is strength? Well, it's the amount of force that your muscles can exert, right? It's the amount of force that your muscles are able to generate. So if I've got a 10-pound dumbbell and I want to raise it up off the ground, I need to generate at least 10 pounds of force, a little bit more than 10 pounds of force, because I'm trying to overcome it, right? So the amount of force that my muscles are generating is 10.1 pounds, we'll say, right? It's just a little bit more than 10. So that is what we're talking about there, right? So yeah, actually, Adam, the whole making new muscle cells, honestly, it's kind of an indirect thing. It's not something I'm actually really an expert on because it's not so much a human thing to do. I don't mean like an alien or anything like that, but like we don't really do that very well. So honestly, I'm pretty in the dark about it as well. um, but so yeah, so muscular strength, right? A good way to describe this that I really like, my favorite definition for describing it is the amount of internal tension that a muscle can generate in order to overcome an external force, right? So you've got muscles that are able, the difference between like if we go to the gym, and let's say like Max and I are going to both have like a bench pressing contest to see who can like lift the most weight. And he generates more weight than I do, right? He puts more weight on the bar than I can. His muscles are able to generate more internal tension. Therefore, they are able to manipulate a greater amount of external force than I would be able to, right? And that's kind of the difference. And, some of this isn't always directly related to strength. One of the things we have to remember about strength is that it's not just about like, when you actually get into like the practical parts of it, like I was trying to explain this to Lindsay actually yesterday morning when we were in the gym. We were talking about this. But she's like, what weights do I need? And I was like, go get little, if you can find 2.5s. And she was like, 2.5 pounds. And I was like, yeah, these are very small muscles. We were doing YTAs. And we were doing a really high number of repetitions of them. And she was like, that seems so little. And I was like, well, when you look at like the physics of it, like no matter, like your muscle might actually be really strong in a position like this where you're rowing, but that same muscle, has to exert force when your arm's all the way extended like this. It creates way more torque, making it way, way, way harder. So, that happens all the time where like I'll get like, one of my favorite pairings that I used to do back in the day with clients, because when you finally get your spot on the cable machine, you kind of want to use it as long as you can because it's always so busy. But I would love doing like cable flies followed by like reverse flies. And so I would get these like big dudes who would be like, oh, pull the pin. Like, we'd be doing the cable flies and they'd be like, they'd have it like 70, 80 pounds. They're like, yeah, and then I'd have them do like a reverse fly and they would have to drop it to like 10, 20 pounds. And it was like an ego shattering thing. And I was like, look, like the attachment of this, like you get this huge muscle here and all of this, and it's attaching like pretty well. Like the amount of length of this muscle here and here compared to the length of your arm versus your posterior deltoid, which is about that long, and still the same length of your arm. This is 3 times bigger, so it's going to be 3 times as strong. And that explanation always kind of helps, and that's the thing. That's what's interesting about strength, right? So, that's the kind of thing that we need to know how to manipulate strategically. Because here's the thing: maybe you won't necessarily have good access in the gym. Like if I didn't have a cable machine, right? I can still get some of those same benefits, and I can manipulate exercises and make them harder simply by changing like little angles and things like that. So the factors that can contribute to your strength are going to be things like the synthesis of your contractile proteins. So like I said, we don't necessarily make new muscle cells as much as we do stuff the existing muscle cells that we have with proteins to make them larger. It will be our muscle fiber types, how, whether or not you've got mitochondria filling up your muscle cell or whether you've got a lot of those contractile proteins, gender differences. The point of your tendon insertion is a really big one that indicates your strength. So for instance, like I'm a pretty good example of this because you'll notice I got a really big gap here. You see that? Like that is a huge gap, and it's because like my biceps muscle's not very long. Like it becomes a tendon pretty early on. So when you look at that, right, if you look at like the point of your tendon insertion versus strength,
some people can experience Popeye distortion with that tendon as well. No, for real.
Yeah.
It's not just the long head bicep, it's a short head bicep too. So you'll see the bulge either on the bottom of the arm near the elbow or upper near the shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah. So and that's really scary looking and definitely caused by like an injury, but this version here, you can see like, this version of a guy, and then this version goes down like a little bit further, right? It's kind of interesting, right? Like if you look at the length of this really long tendon reduces your strength pretty intensely. You'll hear people tie this conversation. You'll hear people like tie this conversation into like where your genetics are meant to be. I don't put too much stock in this, by the way, just so you guys know. But you'll hear people say it's like if you do notice that you've got like big gaps and you've got these big long tendons, you were meant to be like a cardio athlete. You're more of a type 1 person sort of biologically. That's sort of like how your DNA is sort of like paired together. So you probably come from a tribe of runners versus like somebody who's, you see that gap kind of fill in naturally, even if they're not like overly muscular or anything like that. You just notice that like their muscles kind of go all the way to the ends of their joints. You'll hear people say that is usually somebody who is meant to be like very type 2, more like a tribe of fighters. Look up Popeye. Yeah. Oh, I don't want to. And then there is Popeye arm. Injury. which is,
And I've actually read the term in medical journals. It's
yeah,
like, yeah, they call it Popeye distortion or something like that.
that's actually not so bad. But it's usually after something like this, after a
It's
tear.
and it's most often at the lower end near the elbow. So
Yeah.
it's most
Oh, there we
often at the long head. Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. So this is where the long head has torn, and so this muscle has basically slid down.
My worst nightmare.
As terrifying. It's the worst. Never, ever, ever. Those pictures were not so bad. Never, ever, ever Google biceps tendon tear.
Oh my God, that's a torn muscle that you just posted right now? That
Mhm.
long, oh my God.
No, it's
Sorry.
well, torn muscles are very different. What he was just showing was a torn tendon that
Ugh.
changes the position of the muscle.
It's good distinction, Adam.
I see.
It's just people just don't want to look like that, but it doesn't actually mean anything bad, really.
Ugh. Ouch.
Is that fixable?
With surgery.
Yeah, with surgery.
Only with surgery, yeah.
Not through physical therapy alone.
That's what happened to my friend who snapped his tendon. The dude I told you about who's on a lot of drugs. Yeah, that's what happened to him.
Yeah. So, all right. So those are some of the things that result in strength differences, right? Some of it is neurologic activation as well. Your ability to control your nervous system will also indicate a lot of your strength, and then certain hormonal factors as well. So when we're looking at muscle fiber types, or muscle fiber types, contraction types, we're looking at our different contractions, right? We're going to break contractions down into 3 primary sections, right? We've got the concentric, eccentric, and isometric parts of the lift. Okay. Now you guys are probably I forgot. We are about to see my favorite PowerPoint slide in the entire PFT program. Is it? Oh, no, we don't. No, it's in the kinesiology class. Sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. My favorite is the one where the guy brings the puppy towards his face and then gets the kitten away, and then he isometrically holds an alligator. Those are my 3 favorite slides. Wrong animations. Anyway, concentric contractions. Concentric contractions are what a muscle is doing when it's contracting and shortening. So you guys are probably most familiar with concentric contractions, right? So I'm going to go ahead and steal the images out of my PowerPoint here. So, if we look at something like this, this is going to be our example of a concentric contraction, because you can see the arrow is going this way, right? Like if he has the dumbbell at rest down here, he is bringing it up towards his face. He's contracting his muscles, and his muscles are overcoming gravity, right? So that's concentric, okay? Or we could say that's the positive of the lift, okay? This is the concentric positive portion of a lift, okay? So here's all the things you need to know, and they will ask you any variety of these whenever you get homework or on your test, right? Concentric has a couple different definitions here, but concentric contractions occur when the muscle is shortening. That's a really important term to remember. Your muscle is shortening. The contractile proteins are pulling, right? Remember, guys, we talked about muscles can only pull, right? They can pull and then they can relax, right? And then they could pull and just maybe stabilize, but they don't push in the opposite direction ever. So every muscle you've got has an antagonist muscle on the other side of the joint that pulls the other way. So my bicep pulls this way, my tricep pulls that way, bicep pulls this way, tricep pulls that way, right? That's what allows you to get back and forth. So I concentrically pull my bicep, and then my tricep would concentrically pull, and that's how I would relax my bicep. Okay, so it occurs when the muscle is shortening, it's bunching up, right? Your muscle is generating a greater amount of internal tension than whatever the resistive force is. So again, if there's 20 pounds of resistive force here, he's generating at least 21 pounds of force in his muscle, right? So that causes the muscle to shorten. We can also consider this force production. And when we are listing tempo, this is going to be our last number, okay? So if I listed tempo as XXX, right? This is going to be the final portion of that, right? So that's going to be this one right here. So when you look at a workout sheet and it tells you specifically what to do with your tempo, it's that last number is the concentric part. Okay. So then we've got the eccentric version. Eccentric contractions are the exact opposite. Okay. So eccentric contractions occur when the muscle is lengthening. Okay. So they are exactly the opposite of a concentric contraction. It's a little annoying that he's facing a different way now. Can I rotate this? Sure can. So that's our eccentric contraction here. So now you can actually see, I'll go ahead and put this in a different color here just because it'll make it make a little bit more sense. That's reducing the force and lowering the weight, right? So we would call that an eccentric, or this is the negative portion of a lift, right? So that's the eccentric, or we could call it the negative, right? And if we were to list this out as a tempo, right, and we had like XXX listed there, this would be your first number, okay? This would be the first box there, the first number that you're going to list out. So eccentric contractions, like I said, they're exactly the opposite of your concentric contractions, right? They occur when the muscle's lengthening, so your muscle's being pulled apart. The strength that you are generating is less than the internal tension. So like, for instance, like if I've got 20 pounds in my hand and I generate 19 pounds of force, that 19 is less than 20, so the weight would lower me down, right? So the muscle generates less internal tension than whatever resistive force you're working against. And like I said, it is the first number. Now, one thing that should be mentioned here, especially about eccentric contractions, is they are heavily associated with what we call delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS. I'm in the middle of experiencing DOMS right now myself, but DOMS is a gradual discomfort or inflammation that occurs between 24 and 48 hours after a workout. So you guys know how you're sore the next day after you work out, but then you're really sore the next day, right? It's often way worse on day 2. That's DOMS in a nutshell. DOMS is kind of a phenomenon, actually. We don't fully understand why it works the way it does, because it's not directly related to muscle damage. It's not directly related to anything. Like, they haven't, they've looked at putting people into 2 groups, and then they've damaged one muscle way more than the others. And you would think that like that would mean more DOMS, but then like sure enough, like it was kind of the same, and so there wasn't really a strong connection between that. We really can't figure out why DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, is the way it is. We just know that we do know that there is a connection somewhere between it and eccentric contractions. So what's kind of interesting is if your eccentric contractions are relatively quick, you're actually less likely to be more sore the next day. So for instance, if I were lifting like this and I'm like pushing big heavy weight, then I kind of drop it down and push big heavy weight again, right? And I kind of just drop it down, and I'm really not taking any time to lower the muscle specifically, it actually can result in less soreness. That is not a strategy, by the way. That's not me giving you advice to do it that way. We're just trying to draw the connection of DOMS. We like DOMS. DOMS is actually a really good example of when we went back to yesterday, we talked about that general adaptation syndrome. It's one of our examples of an alarm reaction. Your body goes, damage, so then it just inflames the area. It's like the police putting what is that, yellow tape around everything to keep people out. That's kind of like what your body's doing. It like inflames all of your muscles so that it has time to kind of work on them and repair them. Heavily associated with eccentric contraction. So if you're doing a workout that involves a very long eccentric contraction, which by the way is very good for you, that's a really great way to keep your muscles nice and healthy and injury proof. We love a good eccentric contraction. Be aware you're going to be pretty sore the next day. And explain that to your clients, by the way. Just like let them know. especially if you do slow slow hamstring stuff. That in particular, like for me at least, hamstring stuff in particular, just whew, I'm always really sore after like a slow eccentric hamstring. But it's also what has kept me from pulling my hamstrings for years now, and I'm definitely prone to doing that. So lastly, we've got isometric contractions. Now, isometric contractions, this isn't really, this is a little bit of a different concept here, right? This is a little bit of a different thing. So if you take this, I'm gonna flip this guy again. That's gonna bug me. So isometrics, right? We're gonna kind of put those in the middle here. Isometric contractions, this is the neutral pausing, right? Or we could actually call this instead of neutral, let's say, well, no, that is really what it is. It's a very good like neutral portion of the lift. And this is going to be our middle number here, right? Whenever we list this out on a workout template for our clients, we're going to say this is that middle number there, right? So depending on how you list out your tempo. So this is an equal contraction both this way and this way. It's kind of doing both simultaneously, and it's stabilizing, right? So if, you know, this is muscle shortening over here, and this is muscle lengthening over here, this is muscle stabilizing right here. Okay, and that's the goal here. We're trying to stabilize, okay? So contractions that are occurring when the muscle remains at a constant length, those are our isometrics. Your muscle is generating an equal amount of tension to your resistive force. Your muscle stays the same for stabilization, and it is the middle number. So it should be noted, things that we need to know about isometric training. Isometric exercises dramatically increase your blood pressure. And the reason why is because there is a large, intense increase in specifically tension. You're pulling from both sides of something. So what does that do? Well, that keeps everything locked in, pressure goes up, right? So isometric exercises do dramatically increase blood pressure. This is one of the reasons why you should avoid this with any client who has high blood pressure, right? Again, your blood pressure is going to spike like crazy during a workout anyways, but isometric exercises are actually something we do want to avoid if our client has chronically high blood pressure, because something is at play that is affecting their ability to control that pressure mechanism, right? So not saying that you need to avoid it for everybody, and I'm definitely not saying this, that isometrics are going to cause high blood pressure. That is definitely not what I mean. But they do increase blood pressure temporarily while you're doing them. So any client who has high blood pressure, be careful with these. You basically want to switch up your tempos, right? So let's get into that tempo stuff. We're actually going to kind of move this around a little bit. So, so I've got these kind of listed here, and they're in kind of a weird order. It's like the last number, first. Now it's like, let's put this in the order that we're actually going to see it in our book, right? So it's going to look, it's going to look like this. When you actually list out your workout tempos, guys, he's just shorter in that first picture, right? Or am I crazy? The OCD is strong this morning. Come on. So, you know, this is actually how we're going to kind of actually see our tempo. You're going to see it listed in terms of lengthening first. That's the first number. Stabilizing second. That's the middle number. And shortening third. Okay. So here's what's kind of confusing, guys. And let me show you what I mean by that. Like, let's open up a workout template here. We'll just pull one of our old ones out. Are these templates or are these just examples? They're templates. Okay, so take a look right here. This is sort of a template that we're going to use to write workouts later on. For my new folks, for Kelvin and Panuka, this is the first time you guys have seen this. We'll show you guys this a little bit more later. But here's basically like a blank canvas for, you know, you swap this out. I'd switch this for like that, and then I would pick a number between these numbers. So let's say 3, 15, 60 seconds. And there we go. Right now I've written a chest exercise in sort of the textbook manner here. So if you look at it, right, you'll notice that it's, we've got these ranges here, but what I want you to really key in on is this tempo part right here. And it's listed 4, 2, 1. NASM's got 3 primary tempos that you are going to see in your textbook, okay? You are going to see it listed as 4-2-1 is a really, really common popular one. That's our stabilizing tempo. And that's what we want to use with any client who's really trying to like learn how to do a particular movement, or any client who's like, injury prone and we're trying to sort of work on that injury. We really like a slow tempo because that's a really good way for us to retrain them how to do an exercise, right? And it's a really good way to ensure that we have a really long lengthening phase, which again is a good way to injury proof your muscles. So we would list that out as like, I'll make these a little bigger here, as like a 4, and we'll put like a slash here, 4, oh, it's way easier to do this, 2, 1 tempo. So this is your a very common tempo used for stabilization. Okay, so this is our stabilization tempo. Okay, it's a really, really good one. So what that means when I say it listed as 4-2-1, it means 4 seconds on the eccentric, 2 seconds on the isometric, 1 second on the concentric. Now, what's confusing about that is our example up here is a bicep curl, right? Now, guys, most important thing to remember when we're listing tempo, it always goes in this order. It is always, the first number is always, always, always representing the eccentric portion of the lift. Middle number is always representing the isometric portion of the lift. Now, a bicep curl, I don't know about you guys, but I don't grab dumbbells from the rack and then carry them over like this and then start my bicep curls like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1. I don't know if you do that. I don't do that. I grab them and carry them over like this, like a normal person. I curl and I drop them down, right? Now, does that mean because I start with the concentric part, I'm going to put 1 and then I want a 2-second pause at the top, 2 and then I want a 4-second lowering, 4? Am I going to put 1, 2, 4? No. We don't do that. We always list it 4-2-1, and in every company, not just NASM, but every company out there, eccentric first, isometric second, concentric third. Even if the lift requires you doing the 1 first, you just go 1, 2, 1, 2, and then you would do your 4, and then suddenly you're right back at your tempo the way you're supposed to be, right? So like these are the same, they're representing A, B, and C, right? And A is always lengthening, B is always isometric, and C is always concentric, okay? Always. So if we had a different tempo, this is the one I had you practice the other day, 2, 0, 2-0-2, right? This is a really good tempo for strength. Well, I say strength. It's a really good tempo for size. This, I mean, honestly, it is good for strength, but it's kind of in the middle. We'll put strength and size. Although we'll put size first. It's really good for size and you know what? Moderate strength. That's a good way to put it. It's really good for size and moderate strength. So a 2-0-2 tempo is actually specifically not pausing. So a little bit of control on the way up, a little bit of control on the way down, no pausing between your reps, okay? And then our other tempo that you're going to see in your textbook X, X, X. And this is your fast tempo. This is really good for maximum strength and power. So this is really good for maximum strength and power. So any client who's a power lifter should probably be lifting at this tempo when they are working on that part of their cycle, right? So that's how we list this out. Now, again, don't forget, when it's listed on a piece of paper, it always is the we're saying how long we want your eccentric to be, how long we want your isometric, and how long your concentric. Because here's the thing, guys. Let's look at a shoulder press versus a lat pull down machine. Okay, so shoulder press is this. Well, guess what? A lat pull down machine is also this, right? But here's the difference. Okay, if I had a 4-2-1 tempo and I was supposed to do a lat pull down machine, right? I'm the first part of it. I'm sitting on the machine. I got my legs under the bar, under the pad. I'm going to grab the bar and I'm going to go 1, because that's my concentric shortening. I'm actively pulling. I'm going to pause for 2, 1, 2, and then I'm going to lower. I guess in this case, I'm going to raise, right? I'm going to lengthen for 4. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, but in the same pantomime, if I were doing shoulder presses, gravity's pulling this way now, right? So it's going to look like this. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's my 4-2-1 tempo. So it's not direction based either. Okay, it is based on whether you're shortening or lengthening the muscles. We list it this way, even though, again, like you might have a weirdo who grabs dumbbells off the rack and they walk over like this. And then they're like, that's 1 rep. That's 2 reps. They might count weird. We don't know where people are going to start their rep, you know? But that doesn't matter when these 3 numbers represent the same part of a lift every single time. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have any questions on that, particularly my new folks? Feeling good on that?
Yes, sir.
All righty. Love it. I'll take a thumbs up. Cool. All right. So next thing we've got to
All
look
good.
excellent. We've got to look at how we measure our strength. So there's a couple different, there's some cool methods out there, guys, for measuring strength. This is a really interesting one. This is called a cable tensiometer. And basically this is really good at measuring your isometric strength. So you can actually contract against this, and then you would basically pause and try to hold it in one place, and it can measure your isometric strength, which is really good for clients who have trouble stabilizing. Physical therapists will often use this in their settings because it's a really good place to see. And basically, there's a cable going through here, up to here, and down here, and it can kind of measure that. So that's kind of cool. There's also dynamometers. You can buy these, by the way. They're not expensive. It's not hugely important. Okay, those are expensive. What the world? Where's the $30 one? There we go, $40. Okay, that's not super cheap. There we go, $30. So dynamometers are kind of cool. These are actually where if you are creating strength in one particular area, like your wrist, for instance, you can test your squeezing strength, your grip strength. These are really, really kind of fun. There's a really great video that I've seen. It's like a TikTok or an Instagram or whatever. That is it's this rock climber going around testing people. So he goes to the gym and he goes up to these huge power lifters. Like, these guys are massive. And he's like, hey, do you want to test your grip strength? And he's, kind of a lean dude. And they squeeze it as hard as they can. And then he just blows them out of the water. And they can't believe it. But he's a rock climber, it's all about grip strength. Again, different athletes, right? And I love videos like that. I just love anything where it's you can kind of see the specialty that somebody's put in, I'm so impressed when somebody can deadlift a massive amount of weight, I love powerlifters. I think it's so fun. But then also you get this specific thing that somebody's good at, like rock climbing. It's just really cool. So that's a dynamometer. You can find those. But the one that's going to be relevant to us, this is what we're going to do often, is a percentage of 1 rep max. We want to know basically how much force our client can generate in specific situations, right? So your 1 repetition max is a measurement of the maximal weight a person can lift once. Its definition is its name, you know. And this is a really good tool for you to use if you want to know, like, if you're applying progressive overload to your client, right? So let's say I want a client to lift anywhere from 85 to 100% of their 1 rep max, right? Because they want to generate max strength. They're a power lifter. So take them to the gym and we can do a 1 rep max test, right? We're going to figure out like how much they can deadlift. So we get them really, really, really warmed up. Very important to make sure you warm up before 1 rep max testing. It literally means you are going to be working yourself as hard as you are maximally capable. Make sure you warm up. Take your warm up very, very, very seriously for stuff like this. And so we start with, let's say, like 135 pounds on the bar. They do 5 reps of that. They're feeling great. Cool. We throw another, let's say 50 pounds on the bar. So they're 185. They do another 5 reps. They feel great. And it's like, awesome. So now we'd add like maybe another 20 pounds. So we take it up to 205. They start to struggle a little bit. They're like, all right, that was a little bit harder. So they get like 3-4 reps in, right? And then we're just going to add 10 to 20 pounds every single time until eventually it's like, all right, we're at, let's say 235. And they're like, 1, boom. Now, did we find their 1 rep max? Maybe. Let's try 240. So we add 5 pounds on the bar. It's the lowest amount we can add to a barbell, at least, unless you have the cool ones. Those cool little 1-pounder weights that look like coasters. But you know, we put 5 pounds on and they get another 1. So their 1 rep max wasn't 235, it was 240. And then we put another 5 on, they get maybe halfway up and then they drop it and they're like, I can't get that up. Right? Okay, we give them some, you know, and by the way, you're taking lots and lots of rest between each of these sets, giving them plenty of time to fully reset. But that will tell us their true 1 rep max. This can be done on a barbell squat with a spotter. It can be done on a bench press, right? Lots of different ways you can test out 1 rep maxes. But it's great because now we know we are looking at like a specific piece of data for how strong they are. We can train our client in some percentage range of that. If they're going for endurance, well, they shouldn't be doing, you know, if they're doing 200, if their 1 rep max was 240 pounds, I should really only be lifting between 50 and 70% of their 1 rep max. So we would say like 240 times 50%, that's 0.5, right? Hit enter. And then to 240 times 0.7, that's 70%. There's our 50 to 70% range. So I want them to do, I mean, honestly, if they're doing 50%, I'm probably aiming for 20 repetitions. And if I'm having them do 70%, I'm probably having them aim for at least 12 to 15 repetitions there, right? So there's my endurance numbers. Endurance numbers, by the way, the further you get away from your 1 rep max, the less accurate they get. So I will say, like, if you get a client and they do all 20 at this weight and you're like, could you keep going? And they're like, yeah, that might sometimes happen. Or they might be like, I can't do that many. Depends on like what they're kind of good at, right? So I will say the further you get away from lifting near the 1 rep max, the less accurate your 1 rep max test will be. Because again, they're different energy systems, right? Like if somebody is like, if you're testing them in the ATP PC system and then you're training them in the aerobic system, those numbers are kind of not going to match up. So I will say I don't even do 1 rep max testing with my clients if my goal is to work on their endurance. It's not relevant because they're 2 very different systems. But if I've got a client who's training for like muscle size and strength, 1 rep max testing is a really valuable piece of information. So that is a very cool sort of way to kind of measure that, right? Bodybuilders in particular, powerlifters in particular, you definitely want to know your 1 rep max because their whole sport, their whole goal is to improve that, right? Is to get that 1 rep max number up. Yeah, question. What's up, Adam?
So 1 rep max is always a failure, but would you say normal sets, like people doing 12 to 15 reps of any exercise, should those sets also be to failure? Or
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't try to get to failure on like sets 1 and 2, you know. But like in the later sets, if they're pushing towards failure, I think that's great actually.
I've always I sometimes I don't know if I'm describing this right to clients, like, because they'll ask me, well, how do I know if this is the right weight for me? And I'm like, well, if you're going to max out, or if each set is 12 reps, let's say maybe you could max out at like 15. Like 15 would be your absolute to failure.
Yeah.
Stop a few sets or a few reps before that and repeat that with each set. Is that a
Sure.
good way to describe that to a client?
Yeah, you leave a little bit in the tank is what they say. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a good way to describe it. Like I like to give my clients, so one of the ways that I love to do like rep ranges, or one of the ways I like to tell my clients how many reps to do, is I'll say, I want you, like Lindsay right now, right? We're doing the same lifts. We're working out together, but we are doing them slightly differently. Like she's going for a little bit more endurance. She's going to get a bigger calorie burn than I am. I'm going for a little bit more strength, right? So she's lifting between 12 and I say to 15 reps. I'm lifting between 8 to 12 reps, right? And so like, you know, it's still like relatively high because we got the wedding, like, you know, I'm gonna tone up for the wedding. Right, and go back to my strength stuff later. But like she's, you know, going for like the calorie burn, right? So what I say is like, you know, ideally what I would love is if, let's say we're doing 4 sets, I would love her to hit around 12 for all 4. You know what I mean? But if she can't get to 12 on the 4th set, even though she's been aiming for it, it's too heavy. And if she's getting 15 every set, it's too light, right? Same thing for me. I'm aiming, hopefully lifting heavy enough that like if I get 4 sets of 8, that's great. Because next week I can progress. Maybe I get 10 on set number 1, and I'm like, okay, that was hard. And then I'm like 8, 8, 8 for the remaining. Or I could flip that. And I'm like, I leave some in the tank, 8, leave some in the tank, 8, leave some in the tank. Hard as I can, I get to 10. Hard as I can't, or maybe I get to 11, but I still can't hit fully like 12 on that last final set. It means I left just the right amount in, you know. So that's one of the reasons why I like a good, I'd say 2 to 4 window, 2 to 4 rep window. And then that window gets way shorter the heavier you get, right? So like if you were doing like powerlifting, Adam, you would say like, let's say you're around the 5 rep range. Honestly, you're going to have like, it's like, look, if you get 4, that's actually good. It means you're lifting really heavy. If you're getting 6, it's maybe a little bit light. Let's get you closer to 4. Like the window gets really small towards the like maximal strength stuff. And then the window gets a little bit bigger towards like away from the max strength stuff. Does that make sense?
You have a phenomenal way of making sense of everything, my man. Appreciate you.
Excellent. You, you're the invisible man right now with your background there, buddy. I can see a background and not a person.
Oh, dang. I hit the wrong button.
So yeah, so that is that's a big thing, and that's going to come very relevant here in just a second, as we sort of pivot into looking at training to develop strength, right? So there's a lot of different types of strength. What we've been describing so far is like strength in all 3, you know, portions of a lift, right? That was strength in concentric, that was strength in eccentric, it was strength in isometric. Now, not everybody is necessarily always training for all of these, right? They might be training specifically isometrics, right? Like this could be something you're working on. This is where if you are training to get better at isometrics, you're probably not training for, you know, a certain number of reps, because an isometric is one big long rep. So instead, you're training for like being able to stabilize something, right? Planking, for instance. Anybody in here know what the world record for the longest plank in history is? Anybody know this? It was set by a cop in Thailand, if I'm not mistaken. World record plank length. Oh no, apparently somebody new in Australia got it since the last time I looked it up.
10
And
minutes.
10 minutes. So this guy did it for 9 hours, 30 minutes, and 1 second. That is some serious isometric strength. That's on Guinness. They must have been there in person to watch him. 9 hours. That's some isometric strength. And stuff like that, I'm like, why? How are you going to use that? But yes, that's very much the isometric strength that we're looking at. Yeah, isn't that crazy? So isometric training would be doing like progressive wall sits, progressive planks, or bird dogs and things like that. I mean, in the world of calisthenics, you could do like front levers or back levers. Front levers are an incredible feat of isometric strength, where you basically hold from a bar like this. I always look at front levers and I'm like, that's not that hard. And then I go try to do one and I'm like, I can't, and then it's a ton of isometric lat strength, very, very, very good for you. Start with you start with a hang tuck and then eventually you work your way out to that. We love isometric strength. Isometric strength is actually very, very good for us. There are certain parts of the body that, oh man, do we need more isometric strength? Your knees, for instance, holy crap, we want isometric strength in our knees. What did I call isometrics earlier? The neutral or stabilizing part of a lift. Yeah, I want to know how to stabilize my freaking knees. Because I'm going to step in a hole one day, I'm going to step off a curb and not be ready for it, miss a stair, all that stuff that, if you're able to stabilize really well, you're less likely to get injured, right? Same thing is true with like those planks, right? The reason a plank is so good is it's all about stabilizing your spine. How many exercises do you guys know in the gym where you're moving your spine? I could probably say 50 of them in a row without pausing. That's a big flex, but but I'll bet everybody in here could do that, right? You just start naming exercises in general. Almost every exercise out there involves some movement of the spine in some capacity. Yet, how many exercises involve stabilizing and just holding your spine in place? That list can be kind of short. And it's one of the most important things you do because your spine is a bunch of individual discs. We don't want them sliding around. So we love isometric strength, really, really good way to develop things. When done correctly, isometrics are really good at helping you with that stability. Now, there is also progressive resistance training. This is what you're probably most familiar with. This is what we were just describing a minute ago. When you give yourself the window, you're looking to progress every week or every month, consistently, right? You lifted 5 pounds, you did all 4 sets to the maximum number of repetitions. It's time to go up to 10 pounds, So this is a method of increasing the ability of the muscles, their ability to generate force, right? By definition, we're saying generate force. So progressive resistance training would involve increasing the weight in particular, right? So continued progression is the amount a client can lift each time, particularly with the weight. That is going to say to your body, it signals to your body, hey, we do not have enough tissue tensile strength to deal with this. We either need more cellular fluid so we can get better at putting out energy, or we need more proteins so we have more stuff to lift with things. So like that muscle load is one of the things that triggers growth and development, right? Now, I did say there are other ways to progress as well. You can increase the number of reps. You can increase the stability by making it more and more and more unstable, until eventually you're doing like a shoulder press with your eyes closed, standing on one leg while that one leg is standing on top of like a medicine ball, and then you've got a friend like throwing stuff at you that you have to dodge. That's pretty unstable by that point, like that's also, it's like, I would assume you've mastered the shoulder press at that point. However, those other types of progression are not particularly good for size, if that's what you're going for, or strength, if that's what you're going for. They're very good for endurance if you're increasing the reps. They're very good for recovery and kind of more endurance if you're decreasing the rest time. And they're very good for stabilization if you are increasing the level of stability. But again, going back to yesterday's conversation, progression exists in a lot of different forms, but your progress will be related to the stress that you're giving. If I'm increasing the reps every time and expecting my client to get stronger, that doesn't make any sense. They're different concepts, right? Again, if I go to the gym and start swimming and I'm expecting to improve my mile run time, there's a little bit of carryover there, because maybe my cardio gets a little bit better, but like I'm not running. Lance Armstrong, despite being a big fat cheater, greatest cyclist in the world, at least was. And then he ran like the New York Marathon for the first time, and it nearly killed him because he didn't train for it. He was like, it'll be fine. Which is so funny because he was a professional athlete. Like someone should have told him that he's not going to do well. But nobody did. And so he just like went and did a marathon and he nearly died, So they're just different things. Now, there is also variable resistance training. Now, variable resistance training is using like a special machine with varying intensities throughout different portions of the lift. Now, when I say a specialized machine, there are specialized machines out there. You don't necessarily have to do that, though. Like one of the things that you can do is you can use like chains. It's weird. It's obnoxious. Nobody likes that loud junk in the gym, but here we go. Bench press with chains. Bench press is just a really good example of this. But here's the thing, like these things are loud and obnoxious, but they are an example of what we call variable resistance training. The further you get through the range of motion on each repetition, the harder the exercise gets, right? Because you're adding a little bit of weight the further it gets away from you, the more weight you're actually adding in the middle of each repetition. And then as it comes down, the easier it gets, actually. It is a very good way to train. I think it's very loud. And a lot of times you'll get kicked out of a standard gym, but you can do the same thing with bands, actually. So you can actually practice with like resistance bands, right? Two versions of this, right? So he's going to tie a band to a plate on the ground, and then that's going to give it a really good anchor point. And then good Lord, can you actually do the exercise, guy? He puts an ad and then at the last friggin' 10 seconds. So there we go, right? So this exercise gets harder you don't have to do this explosively, but this exercise gets harder the further he pushes away because there's more tension on the band. You can actually do the opposite as well. You can do variable resistance training by training in the rack and having the bands come down, and then that actually takes the weight off the more you push away, and it gets harder as you sort of like lower it down, but it doesn't work very well. Like it's a thing, but it's not very effective. So generally you want it to get harder through the concentric portion. So that's variable resistance training. There's also a good example of variable resistance training. You guys can also do, I'm not a huge fan of this one, but if you want to do like, they call them heavy negatives. This could be a really good way to bust a plateau. It works really well with like barbell squats if you have two friends. You're going to need both of them. They're going to need to be very coordinated. This is a kind of a dangerous thing to do, but you can do really heavy weight on the bar, and then you're just going to lower that down and sit. You sit on a box, and then you two friends strip two of the plates off, and then you come up. So you pick a weight that you actively cannot squat. It's a weight that's like too heavy for you to actually lift. And then your friends take the weight off, which allows you to get up after some of the weight off, not all of it. And that allows you to come up. Those are like, we call those heavy negatives. You can do heavy negatives with like, dumbbells as well. You can have a friend assist you back up, right? So you do a weight that's way too heavy and then you get assisted back up. That is variable resistance training. It's very, very, very hard on the body. And it is not a form of training that you don't go on a variable resistance routine, guys. Like it's not something you do for 4 to 6 weeks the way you would do like a stand-up routine. It is a plateau buster that you visit every now and then. Like if you're stuck on something and you need to, like, you're like, man, I've just been kind of My strength is like stuck here. I've tried over resting. I've tried eating more. I've tried this. I've tried that. I'm just stuck. It's a nervous system problem. Your nervous system's like, we've adapted. We're good. We don't need to get any stronger. You want to shock your nervous system into ways of like busting that. Variable resistance training can be a really good way to do it. But it is not a routine. I that's why I always stress to people. I'm like, a lot of these techniques we're saying right now are great. They're not routines. You know what I mean? Like a routine is something you do for several weeks at a time. These are like very shocking plateau busters. There's isokinetic training. Isokinetic training is kind of interesting. This uses a very specialized machine that allows you to only contract at a certain pace. You guys ever go to open a door and you go to open that door, it's got the pneumonic tube thing that slows it from being able to, it doesn't allow it to move fast. And it's always kind of embarrassing. You're like, what the hell? You know, like, are you going to close it? And you're like, and then it just slows down. That's kind of how isokinetic training works, actually. It's a machine that only allows you to move at a very specific speed. Now, because you are going to contract as hard as you can against it, but it's still only letting you move so fast, they got to strap you in. They're kind of cool looking machines. So he's doing both leg extensions and hamstring curls. The machine can flip the resistance. And you'll notice he's strapped down. So no matter how hard he contracts, the machine's only going to let him move so quickly. It's really good for physical therapy. You're not going to see this in most typical gyms, but if you guys end up working in physical therapy someday, you might end up being in charge of like, you know, physical therapists would assign this to someone, and then you're in charge of like, you know, showing the client how to do it and stuff. There is also plyometric training. Plyometrics are awesome, very good for training your explosiveness. Plyometrics are your explosive exercises. You'll also sometimes hear these referred to as reactive exercises. Reactive exercises are where your body is literally reacting as fast as possible. So, as fast as possible, aka plyometric. So, explosive methods of training your muscles.
Still talking.
Oh, hold on, Dan, I'm going to mute you. So that's going to be, this is really good at enhancing both your strength and your power, because it is actually training you through what is called your myotactic stretch reflex, a really long term that we don't necessarily have to use all the time, but stretch reflexes, right? And what a stretch reflex is, there's a really cool thing that your body does in order to protect itself. Remember, your muscles want to pull this way, right? So they get stretched out when they go the other way. So when I bunch them up, they're shortened. Your muscles love that. They love being in a shortened state. You know, imagine like a piece of paper that you've got folded, right? It is not at risk of tearing. You know, if it's this long, it's not really at risk of tearing while I've got it folded. But if I stretch it out all the way and then I pull it even further beyond its means, eventually it's going to tear, right? Same concept in your muscles. And one of the things we're going to get into later when we look at muscle flexibility is that's how your muscles actually, like, that's what causes them to panic. The more stretched out they get, the more they kind of freak out because they're like, whoa, we're going to tear, right? So what they'll do is they'll naturally want to contract back and stay in a shortened state. Shortened states feel safe to your muscles, right? So when you rapidly stretch a muscle, like in a plyometric exercise, your nervous system is kind of naturally designed to go, whoa, and then pull back on that same muscle. So if I rapidly stretch my bicep, it kind of wants to bounce back this way naturally. If I rapidly stretch out my glutes by going down like this really explosively, it naturally kind of wants to pull me back to standing. And so that's actually something we can take advantage of when we're trying to be more explosive. Runners who focus on like a really strong knee drive actually get a little bit more explosive on their hip extension, which makes them a faster runner overall. You are learning how to snap, right? Same thing is true with your hamstrings. You learn how to, you know, strongly extend your leg. It is naturally going to want to snap back this way. And it's one of the reasons why we look at practicing this move right here, which is really good at helping you turn your legs over faster and sprint more effectively. So we call that a stretch shortening cycle. You stretch the muscle goes, "Wah!" and then it wants to rapidly shorten in the opposite direction. And that's why plyometric training or jump training or reactive training is so effective. Really, really, really good at teaching you how to be more explosive. So one of my favorite exercises to do that is like a rebound style box jump. So you start them standing, they throw their arms down really rapidly, which gives a stretch to the glutes, right? Then they jump up onto a box, land, get low in that landing, and then jump off, land, and then they do a really explosive rebound to the bottom. A regression to this that I think is honestly probably more effective because you get to focus a little bit more for beginners is a simple depth jump. So a depth jump is an exercise where you actually start on the box, and you'll notice he's going to go down, at least he should, and immediately spring up. Oh, he's doing it barefoot too. So he goes down. Now, the second he hits the ground, he's not going to pause at the bottom. He's going to immediately spring upwards again, right? And that's the thing. You do not want long pauses. In fact, the isometric portion of the lift should be as short as possible. All right, and these are drop jumps as well. These are small versions where you do a single, you kind of step off with one leg rather than jumping with both legs. And again, you spring as quickly as possible on that jump, right? And that's, and he's doing a straight leg version as well. So that's a very, very good plyometric, probably, in my opinion, the best plyometric out there. If you're only training one move to get better at like explosive, if you're trying to make your jumps more explosive, I would say the depth jump is key. So he starts tall, comes down, does not pause, right? We want that transition between like the lengthening and the shortening. We want that to be as short as possible. So is that very good for building stability? Not really. You're not stabilizing for very long. In fact, we want that stabilization to be as short as possible, but it is a very great way to improve your overall explosiveness. And that's what some people are going for. So again, we see this eccentric portion of the lift as short as possible. We see the stabilizing as short as possible. And then we are obviously exploding when we're contracting. This would be our plyometric tempo. So that's a really good one for athletes in particular, because a lot of sports are basically, it comes down to, both athletes are doing the same thing. Whichever one can do it faster, that's the winner of the event. So that kind of pivots us into talking about developing muscular power. Where does our power actually come from, right? Well, in order to understand this, we kind of need to look at the formula for power here. So we're going to get a little mathy. It's not going to be too bad, but basically power is this. Power equals your force times your velocity. Okay, this is a formula that you're going to see me write a lot. Right, so power equals force times velocity, okay? So when I say force, I am talking about like the amount of tension generated by your muscle. Right? So force is the amount of tension generated by the muscle. Okay, so that's our force production. Okay, the amount of the amount of tension generated by the muscle, right? And then we've got velocity, right? Okay, so the velocity is going to be the speed of a muscular contraction, or it is how fast you can generate that tension, right? So these are very different concepts from one another, right? And that gives you an overall power output, right? And your power output is going to be defined as the speed of contraction, or the speed, the maximal like rate of force production, right? So force is how much weight you can lift. Velocity is the speed. And another way to say power is rate of force production. If I'm training for power, I am training for the rate. Sorry. I'm training for the rate of force production, right? I put the two concepts together. If we are trying to improve our rate of force production, right? If that's my goal, right? If I want to maximize my power output, then obviously I'm working to develop my type 2X or type 2B muscle fibers, right? Type 2X, type 2B muscle fibers. They're the same thing. So when I said type 2X muscle fibers, right, we talked about a little bit about the difference between those muscle fibers, right? Like if we're kind of drawing this out, very simply, you've got type 2 muscle fibers here, right? And, you're going to see a lot of proteins in both of them. But you're probably going to see maybe just a little bit more in the type 2X1 over here, right? Oh, that didn't do anything. That is so frustrating. Whatever, you guys, it doesn't have to be a perfect thing right now, but you might see a couple extra proteins in there. That gives this muscle a little bit more strength than this one over here, right? But one of the things you're also going to see is you're also going to see more connections to your nervous system. Your nervous system is going to be attached to more of those actual muscle fibers, right? So when you are training for maximal strength, that'd be phase 4 of the OPT model, by the way. Remember that staircase we talked about, right? If you're training for maximal strength, or if you're training for power, both of those things, that's phase 5. We are going for type 2X muscle fibers, okay? How do we get them? What are the 3 sort of physiologic adaptations that are going to give us more strength and explosiveness? Well, if you're looking at your nervous system, we're looking for generating more motor units, right? So a motor unit, by definition, is a neuron and all the muscle fibers it's attached to. So a motor unit is like, it looks like this, right? This particular neuron here that we're seeing, and I know this kind of looks like our muscle. Your muscles and your neurons look really similar when you slice them, but there's a neuron right here, okay? The blue part's a neuron. And it's got this little wire that comes down and it's attached to 1, 2, 3, 4 muscle fibers. So if you want more strength, you need to have more motor units, because then if I had 2 of these neurons, I'd be attached to 8 muscle fibers. If I had 3, I'd be attached to 12 muscle fibers, right? So the more motor units you can recruit, the more activity there is in your nervous system, the stronger your contraction is going to be. So a greater number of motor units will be recruited to contract as many muscle fibers as possible. That gives us more explosiveness. But another thing that we can do is we can also improve what's called our rate coding, or our motor unit firing rate, okay? So here's what's interesting about motor units. And we'll talk more about this in other classes, but the way your neurons actually work, guys, they can't send big or small signals. That's not how they work. So like, for instance, like if you were trying to like whisper to one person, but you were trying to like scream at someone else, you would just be louder, right? You would use more force. You would use your vocal cords more, right? Your nervous system can't do that. If it needs to send a big signal, it can't just send a bigger signal, right? It uses the same amount of electricity for every single signal out there. But what makes a weak contraction versus a strong contraction is how fast it sends the one signal after the other. So for instance, a weak contraction might be something like this. And a strong contraction would be something like this. Right? It's going to send one signal after another, right? So if we look at like rate coding, let's see if I can actually find a picture of this. No, I'm getting a bunch of coding images. Yeah, I didn't think that would work. imagine, okay, so I'm going to draw like kind of a diagram here. So this is the how much electricity is generated on this axis, and this is your time on this axis down here, right? So here's the thing, if your electric signals kind of look something kind of like this, where they generate, this is, by the way, it's around like, I think it's 40 millivolts, I think. Don't quote me on that. I might have my millivolts wrong, but it's going to need to get to that number every time, right? So if I were to, go like this, create that much electricity, so then a signal gets made, create that much electricity, so a signal gets made, right? There we go, right? That was this here is a weak contraction, okay? Now, the same neurons firing more frequently, as quickly as possible, to where they're going to the same amount of force, but they're just firing like one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other. This is a very, very powerful, strong contraction, if that makes sense, right? So the difference between a weak contraction and a strong contraction is how fast one signal gets sent after the other one, okay? That's one of them. So now we got strength determined by how many motor units we're firing. And we've got strength determined by how fast we are firing one neuron after the other. And the third thing that gives us strength is how in sync those neurons are. I was going like this a minute ago, but imagine if I could snap that quickly. The more in sync they are, the louder it's going to sound with my snapping fingers, right? Well, the more in sync they are, the more all of your fibers are firing at once. So that motor unit synchronization is really important. All your motor units firing in sync with one another gives you an efficient contraction as possible. A good way to understand that is, let's say all of us are going to be having a tug of war, right? So we're all going to be in line. So I'll be in the front. Benita, Adam, Panuka, Alan, Max, Freddie, and Kelvin. Kelvin, you're going to be the anchor at the very back, right? All of us are doing a tug of war, right? So if we all pull as hard as we can, right? And then, like we're making some progress, we're kind of backing our way up. But like, what's happening is like, while I'm taking a step back and maybe transferring to my other leg, right? Maybe I reset my grip. And while I'm resetting my grip, at the same time, let's say Benita, who's behind me, she's giving her maximum effort pull, right? And then Adam, who's behind her, he's, kind of doing the same thing. He's got his feet and then he's shifting with his body. So we're all doing slightly different things. And while overall we're all pulling the rope backwards, because we're not in sync with one another, I'm resetting my grip while you're giving your maximum effort, while someone else is resetting their feet, while someone else is giving their maximal effort. We're all kind of all over the place. We're going to lose overall like power, versus like oftentimes one of the best ways to win a tug of war is to have the person in the back, the anchor, shout to everybody else. And so they'll go 1, 2, 3, pull. 1, 2, 3, pull. And you get really organized and everybody gives their maximal effort at the same time. Everybody stabilizes at the same time. And if you ever work at a kid's summer camp, there's the key to victory. So that's kind of like how motor unit synchronization works, actually. It's one of the reasons why I told you guys you get all of your ATP back in about 3 minutes. And yet you'll notice in your textbook, it says 3 up to 5 minutes of rest, right? Sure. Yeah. I imagine that's a great way to move something big and heavy. But you take up to 5 minutes of rest. Like, what's up with that extra 2 minutes? Is it because some people recover more slowly? Yeah, actually, kind of. But also a big part of it is like, you'll notice after a really heavy lift, you get the jitters. Your nervous system's firing like crazy. So we need to take the time to kind of calm that down and reset the system. That way we can keep everything. Yeah, I figured as much, Gerald. No problem. Don't even sweat it. you know, we gotta in case you can't hear me. We've got to make sure that we're in sync. So we take these big long rest periods and we lift very explosively. We go from like 0 to 100 as fast as possible, not only because obviously that's more explosive, but also because it improves our motor unit synchronization. So when you're training your nervous system to be as heavy and explosive as possible, if I've got anybody out there who wants to be a power lifter, you're trying to improve your 1 rep max, you need to make sure you're recruiting as many motor units as possible, which means lifting really heavy. You need to improve your motor unit firing rate, which means lifting as explosively as you can. And I know it's going to look like this, really explosive, really slow because it's super heavy, but you're trying to be explosive. That improves your rate coding. And you need to rest. It's important to take time between your sets so you can turn everything off instead of turning everything back on. Imagine if I were trying to get your guys' attention and everybody had their microphones on and you're all talking at like different rates all at different times. It's going to take me forever to get everybody's attention if we're all trying to, let's say I'm trying to coordinate you guys into saying something together. We're never going to get in sync. But if everybody shuts up for a second, right, and then we all can start at the same time, we're going to be much more in sync, right? So that's where your power kind of comes from, right? That if you're trying to develop type 2 muscle fibers, whether they're for maximal strength or if they're for explosive power, these are all 3 concepts, the most important things that are related to that. So when we're looking at our adaptations, well, everything we've talked about today, kind of summarizing it up before we move into, we're going to get into flexibility here in just a little bit. We're going to watch a video first, and then we're going to get to flexibility. If we're talking about our adaptations here, we've got some neural adaptations that are going to happen from resistance training, right? You're going to get increased like strength and you're going to get increased power, but you don't necessarily get increased size, right? Like that's not what's happening. You're not getting more mitochondria. You're not getting anything like that. Really, all you're doing is you're getting some neural adaptations where your brain's learning how to be efficient, right? That's great. You know, we can get the size and stuff later. Also increasing your stabilization and your proprioception. Those are some things you'll get from strength training. So you can train to improve your nervous system to be more stable by training in an unstable environment and getting wobbly, or you can train to be more explosive by training with large amounts of rest and lifting big heavy weight. We've also got hypertrophy adaptations. These are enlargement of the actual muscle fibers. You get more actin and myosin proteins, right? An increase in the number of myofibrils in every one of your cells. That's going to make your cells bigger, right? If I had a cell, like, you know, and it's got a wall, it's like a membrane, it's like a sack, right? And I just stuffed a bunch of proteins in there, it's going to get bigger and bigger, right? That's what hypertrophy is. We're also going to see power output intakes. You kind of take those neural adaptations with your strength and put them together. And there you go. We've got increased power, right? We've got the ability to produce more force, and we've got a nervous system that's sensitive. I stretch it, whoo, it snaps back the other way, you know, real sensitive to that, which is really, really great. Now there is hyperplasia, and it does happen, Adam. You asked about it earlier. You asked a little bit. We've got hypertrophy, which is making the muscle cells bigger. We do experience hyperplasia. Hyperplasia is increasing your actual muscle cells, right? Making more of them, right? That is definitely something that does happen, right? Oh, we lost the other Bano. Gerald, we lost you. Now Alan's gone. She'll get back here in just a second. But so hyperplasia is increasing your number of muscle cells. This occurs in animals pretty frequently. It is sort of an indirect thing that we can't necessarily directly train for in humans. Again, kind of going back to our genetics, some people are going to be a little bit more type 2, but resistance training does not increase the number of your muscle fibers. Your muscle fibers will change in response to like your lifestyle and stuff, but not because of resistance training. They change because your lifestyle is moving. I'd say life cycle, as you move through like different stages of life. Now he just made his muscle cells bigger. Now just one other, it's not really an adaptation, but it kind of is, also muscle soreness. We will experience inflammation in response to exercising. This is caused by damage to your myofibrils, right? At least some of the muscle soreness is related to the damage. So if you take your muscle cells, and particularly your type 2, because they're the ones that make the most lactic acid, type 2 muscle fibers primarily rely on glycolysis for your energy production. That's why you get a burning due to all that lactic acid buildup. And then there is like the cardiovascular adaptations that you'll get as well. I said you'll get more wires attached to your muscle fibers, which will make them twitch harder and contract harder. Great. Well, you'll also get more blood vessels. Your body will make, we call those your hemodynamic adaptations. Your heart rate will increase or its ability to output energy due to strength training. Your stroke volume, your heart's ability to squeeze lots of blood every time it contracts, increases with strength training. And even VO2 max, because you've just got more muscle mass, you got more stuff to run in your body. So your cardiovascular system will work to keep up with that. And we'll also even see like a decrease in cholesterol levels, which is kind of cool because your cholesterol is basically be converted into hormones instead, which is great. That's a response that also helps like trigger the growth. So when you are in a growth cycle, it makes it much easier for your body to convert those cholesterols into hormones. So that's all the strength part of a workout and the strength training. Now, I got a really good video that's going to kind of summarize everything we talked about here. This is a relatively long video, but man, does he give a good explanation of how growth actually works here. So hypertrophy. Is that what I looked up earlier? Yeah. Relatively long video, but man, this guy's explanation is so freaking good.
Hi everybody, Dr. Mike here. In this video, we're going to take a look at skeletal muscle hypertrophy. Now we all know that going into the gym, lifting weights, undergoing resistance training increases our muscle mass, muscle volume, muscle size, and muscle cross-sectional area, all of which we term skeletal muscle hypertrophy. But the question is, how does this occur? So in this video, I'm going to go through the mechanisms that promote skeletal muscle hypertrophy. But the first thing we need to go through is the skeletal muscle itself. So let's just say we have a whole muscle like a bicep, for example. Now, we know that this whole muscle is surrounded by connective tissue that we term fascia. And if we have a look inside of that whole muscle, you'll find that there's these discrete areas called fascicles. They themselves are surrounded by connective tissue, which we call perimysium. Now you can see within each fascicle we're going to have skeletal muscle cells known as muscle fibers. And you can see these fibers. Now if I were to take one of these fascicles and pull out one of these muscle fibers, which we call a muscle cell, you're going to see a couple of things. Firstly, it's surrounded by connective tissue as well. So the whole muscle, connective tissue, right? The fascicle, connective tissue, and then the muscle fiber, connective tissue. Now this is called the endomysium, that connective tissue around the muscle fiber. And underneath that, you've got the cell membrane, because all cells have a cell membrane, and we call this for muscle cells the sarcolemma, all right? Now you can see that I've drawn up a couple things. First of which, these little blue things here are called satellite cells. They're going to be very important when it comes to hypertrophy. Satellite cells are sitting between the sarcolemma, so the cell membrane, and the connective tissue, the basal lamina. Okay, and they're sitting there and they're quiescent, which means they're asleep and they're waiting to be stimulated and do something very specific in order for skeletal muscle hypertrophy to occur. The other thing you can see is the nuclei of skeletal muscle. They have more than one. And again, this is important when it comes to satellite cells. Remember, the nucleus is where DNA is transcribed. We make more DNA. Now remember, proteins come from amino acids, which come from DNA. That's important. You can also see that if we were to take out one muscle fiber, that inside they're really filled up with these things called myofibrils, these tubes. Now these myofibrils are made up of proteins. two major types of proteins. There's more, but two major types you need to know called actin and myosin. Now what you're going to find is that these proteins inside the myofibrils, they're contractile proteins, because not all proteins are contractile, right? But these are contractile proteins. Now, you'll see that dispersed between the myofibrils, we have some organelles, some subcellular components, things like mitochondria, right? Mitochondria is important for producing ATP, energy, which we need for skeletal muscle contraction. We also have things like sarcoplasmic reticulum. Now, the sarcoplasmic reticulum is the endoplasmic reticulum, but for skeletal muscle. And their important role is that they are the storage unit for calcium. We also need calcium for muscle contraction. In actual fact, calcium and ATP are two of the major things that we need for muscle contraction. There's other organelles as well, but let's just focus on those two. All right, now let's take a myofibril out. Have a look at this, right? We've got the myofibril sitting within the muscle fiber, sitting within the fascicle, sitting within the whole muscle. Each component is surrounded by connective tissue. We take a myofibril out and we look at the actin and myosin, contractile proteins within, and you'll see they have a particular arrangement. What I've drawn up here is something called a sarcomere. Now you keep hearing this word sarco as a prefix when we talk about skeletal muscle because it means flesh, all right? So you can see the two major types, actin, which we call the thin filament, and myosin that we call the thick filament. Now, in order for muscle to contract, muscle, its job is to contract so that force can be generated, usually things can move. And you got cardiac muscle to pump blood, smooth muscle to push things through the hollow insides of that lumen, and we've got skeletal muscle attached to the skeleton so things can move, right? So, what we need to do is that this thick myosin filament needs to bind to the thin actin filament, and these little myosin heads need to walk their way along the actin filament, and it pulls it in. What this does is it shortens the skeletal muscle. In actual fact, it shortens this thing called the sarcomere. Now, you're going to have sarcomeres lined up in series like this, or I should say, and lined up in parallel. Okay, and this is going to be important when it comes to skeletal muscle hypertrophy as well.
It's something we actually don't get to talk about very often, but that is an important thing to remember. When it comes to in series, what he means is like you will see like they're stacking this way, and in parallel they're going this way. Those are two different types of growth, right? Again, kind of you can imagine it as like a bunched up muscle versus like a long, strong muscle, right? So if you create something that's long and then you stack all of it up later, it's a pretty good way to do that, or vice versa. You make something very wide and then you can kind of extend its length. But those are two different concepts related to growth, which is awesome.
Now remember, the myosin can't bind to the actin unless calcium is present. Calcium frees the actin so it can bind, and calcium sits within the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and we need ATP. The thing with ATP is we don't actually have a lot of it just freely floating around. You think we would, but we don't. We need to generate ATP, and so skeletal muscle needs to generate ATP fast. And we'll talk about that with skeletal muscle hypertrophy soon. All right. Couple things. Now, when we talk about hypertrophy, I told you increasing the size, increasing the volume, increasing the mass, increasing the cross-sectional area. What do you think is increasing here? Is it the whole muscle? Is it the fascicle? Is it the muscle fiber? Or is it the sarcomere? Or is it the protein subunits of the sarcomere? Well, it's not just these individual things. So for example, a lot of people rely on skeletal muscle hypertrophy as just being an abundance of the proteins, the contractile proteins, and their arrangement within the sarcomere. People think that skeletal muscle hypertrophy is only more sarcomeres lined up in series or lined up in parallel. But that's only one type of skeletal muscle hypertrophy, right? Called myofibrillar hypertrophy. I think we should write this down, right? So you can have myofibrillar hypertrophy. And like I said, what that is an increase in the protein subunits for contraction and an increase in the amount of sarcomeres we have either in series or in parallel. But we know that up to 20% of the whole muscle is connective tissue, like I stated before, right? So you've got that fascia, you've got the perimysium, you've got the endomysium, you've got the epimysium on the outside here. So up to 20% is connective tissue. So in connective tissue is dynamic. It doesn't just sit there. Connective tissue can grow and it can contribute to strength. So you can have connective tissue hypertrophy. Now, the last or third type of hypertrophy that we need to talk about is hypertrophy of non-contractile subunits and non-connective tissue, which has to do with the stuff sitting between the cells and in the cells, for example, which includes things like the organelles and the fluid, and also the metabolic energy sources that are stored inside of these muscle cells. So, for example, now we call this, let's just write this down, we call this sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So what we're referring to for sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is an increase in the size or abundance or volume of the organelle. So it could be the mitochondria, it could be the sarcoplasmic reticulum, could be the T-tubules that skeletal muscle needs to propagate that action potential to tell it to contract, right? It could be an accumulation of fluid inside, and it could be an accumulation of the metabolic products needed to produce energy. So up to 3% of skeletal muscle is made up of glycogen. Up to 5% is made up of triglycerides. So you can increase the abundance of these, and they're going to come back later when we talk about hypertrophy. So these are the three major types. Now the thing is, what causes these types of hypertrophy? So Dr. Schoenfeld, Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, is the king of skeletal muscle hypertrophy, and all the research that I've performed, most of it has come from Dr. Schoenfeld. And so what Dr. Schoenfeld states as the three major causes or stimuli for hypertrophy include the following: mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage. So these three stimuli are what can result in these three types of hypertrophy. Now your question may be, well, which of these hypertrophy is occurring? Usually all of them are going to be occurring to some degree. You're probably going to think with resistance training, probably the most common type of hypertrophy is myofibrillar hypertrophy. But in saying that, when you look at bodybuilders and compare them to powerlifters, their training regime is different, but both of them exhibit quite significant musculature, quite significant muscle growth. And they train differently, right? So for example, bodybuilders have a moderate load with shorter rest periods, and you're going to find that powerlifters have a higher load with longer rest periods. And what you might find is that some bodybuilders may more so have a connective tissue based and sarcoplasmic based hypertrophy, because they tend to have more stores of glycogen within their cells, and they tend to have more connective tissue products as well compared to the powerlifters. So training type can be specific to the type of hypertrophy that you get. All right. So mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage. Of these, mechanical tension is king, right? And you'll find that metabolic stress and muscle damage are additive to this process, because you rarely get skeletal muscle hypertrophy on metabolic stress alone and muscle damage alone. Now let's talk about some things. Let's talk about how this can result in this. All right, so when you've got mechanical tension on a muscle, so you're lifting a particular load over time. And so we know that we have eccentric portions of a movement and concentric portions. Now in the eccentric portions, where you've got lengthening of the muscle, but these sarcomeres are contracting, you can have damage occurring to the myofibrillar units. Now, damage promotes some form of inflammatory response. It can recruit cytokines and inflammatory cells, and this promotes repair. That's great. What also happens is this type of damage wakes up the sleeping satellite cells, the quiescent satellite cells, and they are myogenic cells. That means they're basically muscle stem cells. And what they can do is they fuse, since they're sitting underneath the basal lamina, right, but above the sarcolemma, they fuse with the muscle cell. They're all muscle cells, remember. They fuse with them and they donate a nuclei. That's why we've got more nuclei here. Donates a nuclei, and what that means is there's now more nuclei, more DNA, more transcriptional activity, more amino acids and proteins being produced. In actual fact, when you look at skeletal muscle, the larger the muscle is correlated with more nuclei. And this has to do with that satellite cell. So the satellite cell is really important for donating the nuclei. But in addition, the satellite cell can call upon particular transcriptional activities, right? Since it's got this additional nuclei, transcribe more pathways associated with anabolic or growth pathways. So for example, mTOR, MAP kinase, calcium signaling pathways, all of these can be recruited pathways for growth, anabolism. All right, so we'll focus on that. Now, when you look at the eccentric and you start to go into that pattern of movement, eccentric stretching at the same time that it's contracting, you can find that in some studies, animal studies predominantly, that the types of growth that you get at the sarcomere is an addition of sarcomeres in series. And when you get more concentric movements, the addition of sarcomeres is in parallel. All right, so again, the type of that movement can change what type of hypertrophy you have at the sarcomere. So talking about the myofibrillar hypertrophy. If we actually take all the proteins within a skeletal muscle, what you're going to find is up to 70% of them are myofibrillar proteins. Right, 70%. 20% of them are sarcoplasmic proteins, and around about 10% are mitochondrial proteins. All right. Now, a couple of other...
For the record, sorry, I hate to interrupt, but I love this video so much. Think of that as like this, right? So if you focus on developing your eccentric strength first, it is kind of like building, you have a muscle that looks like this. You are building the sarcomeres at parallel. So you're building longer like versions of them because you're doing more eccentric strength. And then later you go to create them in series. So then all of a sudden you focus more on concentric strength as a later portion of your style of lifting. And all of a sudden you're growing like this, which is massively increasing your overall volume. It's one of the reasons why, in addition to making sure that you build a strong foundation of stability, but it's one of the reasons why NASM starts you with a slow, very long eccentric tempo.
Other things is if we have a look at different types of load, so when we look at load, lifting load, it's usually going to be represented as a percentage of our 1 RM, and we usually equate that to how many reps we can perform of a particular weight. All right, so you can have a low rep scheme, a moderate rep scheme, and a high rep scheme. All right, low rep scheme, 0 to 6 reps, moderate 6 to 12 reps, anything above 12, 13, 14, 15 reps and above is going to be a high rep scheme. So what they've found is that the low to moderate rep scheme seems to be more beneficial to hypertrophy compared to high rep schemes. And the reason is a little bit complex, but has to do with a couple of things. Has to do with mechanical tension and has to do with metabolic stress and muscle damage. But let's look at metabolic stress now. So when you lift a particular load, we need ATP, and I told you that ATP is needed for muscle contraction, and I told you we don't have many reserves of ATP, so we need to produce it. Now, when we need to produce it immediately, we use something called the phosphocreatine pathway. Creatine likes to hold on to phosphate, called phosphocreatine, and it donates that phosphate to an ADP to basically turn it into ATP, we have energy. But that only lasts for like 1 to 3 seconds, not very long at all. So the low rep scheme tends to favor the phosphocreatine pathway. When we go into the moderate rep scheme, right, 6 to 12 reps, we go past that and we start to go into glycolysis. We start to use glucose for energy. Now, if we're doing this quick and fast, and remember, when you have glycolysis and it jumps into the mitochondria, it uses oxygen to produce heaps of ATP. If we need more ATP than we have available oxygen, it has to go through another pathway, which is producing lactate, right? And ATP as well. Now, the thing is, lactate production is associated with hypertrophy in this sense. Lactate can pull water, has a strong osmotic gradient, right? It pulls water into the cell and causes the muscle cell to swell. This swelling of the muscle cell puts pressure on the sarcolemma, so the cell membrane, and this actually stimulates a couple of things. It stimulates amino acid transport and it stimulates anabolism or protein synthesis. Brilliant. So this is something that lactate can do. Lactate production is also associated with testosterone levels and growth hormone levels as well. All right. So it seems to be, this is why the moderate rep scheme seems to be represented as potentially the most beneficial when it comes to hypertrophy. But let's not forget volume, all right? So that's load. Volume is adding up all your reps and sets in a single session, and it seems to be the higher the volume, the better it is for hypertrophy as well. Now, let's talk about something that involves both metabolic stress and muscle damage, which is hypoxia. So hypoxia is a reduction in oxygen going to that tissue and feeding that tissue. So Often we call this vascular occlusion, and there's some types of training where you occlude the vasculature with a cuff, for example. And it seems to be that this type of hypoxic or banded vascular occlusion training can increase muscle hypertrophy if done in accordance with exercise. And it doesn't even need to be under high load. So what they've found is that hypoxia training or vascular occlusion training without any exercise, just the vascular occlusion, can maintain muscle size and strength for individuals who are bedridden. If you mix it in with exercise, there seems to be an additive effects with hypoxia and exercise to promote hypertrophy as well. So that's really interesting. Why? Why does this hypoxic event promote hypertrophy? Couple of theories. One of which is that of lactate. So when you've got no oxygen, we're forced to use glucose to produce ATP and lactate. And like I said, lactate pulls water into the cell. It swells, promotes amino acids and protein synthesis, and it also promotes growth hormone and testosterone coming in. The other thing is when you have a hypoxic environment, low oxygen, you get the production of reactive oxygen species, one of which is nitric oxide. Nitric oxide tells blood vessels to dilate. So after that training, when you release the cuff or the band, you get increased in nitric oxide, tells blood vessels to dilate, you get hyperemia, which is more blood to that area, carrying all the metabolites that you require for growth. So maybe that is also another factor coming into play. So what I've gone through here is the anatomy of the skeletal muscle and gone through the different types of hypertrophy and also the different causes of these particular hypertrophic events. Hopefully that helps and makes sense.
So, very cool. If anybody wants the link to that video, actually, I'll put it in here. So if you guys want to rewatch that, here is the link to that video. Like I said, I think it is just super, super, super helpful. And a really, really great explanation. But again, it's one of those things where, like, if you're cycling through and doing like long eccentric workouts for a little while, like that is going to help you with this type of growth. And then you focus on like that maximal muscle recruitment. That's going to help on this type of growth. And so you put them together, and it's a really good strategy, right? So again, one more reason why we are constantly talking about like moving through different cycles in terms of like how we train and stretch our clients, train and strengthen our clients. So any questions on that before I kind of wrap things up today? We're pretty good, seems. Very long, very confusing video. All right. Okay. So interrupt me if you need to, guys. But next thing we just got to wrap things up with is talking about training our muscles for also remaining flexible. We have to make sure they can actually move through their full ranges of movement. So in an actual overall muscle, you're going to see some parts of your nervous system actually living. Okay. So if we had like a muscle here, right? Like let's say we'll just kind of draw one out here, right? So it might look something kind of like this. So there's the tendon on either end, looks something kind of like that, right? And then it would attach to like a bone, you know, on either side, something kind of like that, right? So there's our muscle, right? And we'll go ahead and we'll fill this up, give it some overall just like big striations here, right? So there's kind of a very simple drawing of a muscle, right? So this muscle is going to be able to contract, and it's going to draw, you know, these two segments of bones together. Now, you have to have a connection to your nervous system within your muscles, right? So you're going to see some specialized anatomy here, one of which is called a muscle spindle. So a muscle spindle is basically this big, long coil that kind of looks something like this. It's all coiled up like that, okay? And it runs from one end of the muscle to the other, okay? And so this right here is your muscle spindle, okay? And muscle spindles are responsible for telling your brain how long your muscle is at any given time. So like if this is 100% stretched out, my brain's getting a signal from my biceps saying we are at full length. If I'm fully contracted like this, my biceps sending a signal to my brain saying we are at minimal length, right? So you're always at some variation between like maximal and minimal. And then you're gonna see another sensor receptor here that kind of looks like this kind of webbing that kind of lives in your tendon here. And its job is to kind of, communicate with the nervous system and tell your nervous system how good of a grip your muscle has, the tendon has, on a bone, right? So it's there to say like, hey, we're gripped onto this bone here, right? And I'm not losing grip on the muscle. I'm not losing grip on the bone. I've got a pretty good hold of everything, right? So this is what we call a Golgi tendon organ, okay? And Golgi tendon organs are designed to tell your brain how much tension there is in the muscle, whether or not the muscle is going to tear here between the tendon and the muscle, or if the tendon's going to tear here between the tendon and the bone. It's telling your brain how much of a grip your muscles have, right? We don't want that to become detached, right? And then there's also joint receptors. If you had two segments of bone, bone here, and you had another bone over here, you've got some sensory receptors that live in this little capsule. This is your joint capsule here, right? You would have some sensory receptors that live in there. That's going to be your overall joint receptors. And joint receptors are responsible for telling your brain what your bones are doing. So all of this information comes together to give your brain information about like what position you are currently in, right? So a muscle spindle lives in the muscle, a Golgi tendon organ lives in the tendon. Now, let's say we want to improve our flexibility, right? Here's the thing we need to remember about like the sensitive anatomy here. You need to remember this, guys. Muscle spindles are dirty, filthy liars. They love to lie to your brain and tell your brain, hey, I'm at maximal length. I cannot possibly stretch out any further. They love to say that, right? And so your muscle, so the natural like reaction to that is like, oh, if I can't stretch any further, the safest thing to do is to pull back the other way. Right? Safest thing to do is to relax that muscle, or shorten it to pull it back in the other direction, right? So what happens is your muscle spindle's telling your brain how long the muscle is, but also if you pull a joint straight, what's that doing? That's pulling these two segments of bone further apart. So both of the Golgi tendon organs are also getting stretched out and they're feeling a certain amount of grip as well, right? So if I wanted to get my muscle to relax, one of the things I can do is I can use a static stretch. This is probably the most common type of stretch you guys are actually familiar with, but it's a slow, long duration stretch where I gradually lengthen my muscle into a resting position and I hold it anywhere from 30 seconds up to about 2 minutes at the longest. So I would stretch and I would hold that stretch for about 30 seconds. Now, while that's happening, I'm feeling the tension, right? My nervous system's going, oh, wow, we're fully stretched out. And the muscle's like, yeah, we're going to tear, right? The muscle spindles being stretched end to end. The tendons are having a hard time gripping the bone. And so I'm stretching my muscle apart, right? Now, if I maintain that pressure, my nervous system goes, man, we're not losing the pressure here. We just keep staying lengthened out. What we should do, safest option, we should relax the muscle. And that sounds kind of crazy because this muscle is trying not to relax. It is trying to pull back. That's actually why you kind of get that shaking when you're stretching out sometimes. That's your muscle trying to contract you, but you're trying to keep it stretched out, right? So what happens is the muscle spindle is trying to contract back towards the center to shorten so it can stop being stretched out. What'll happen is if you maintain that pressure long enough, the Golgi tendon organ, which is like, look, I'm the one attached to a bone here. It is more important that I do not lose my grip. So what it'll say is it'll actually send an inhibitory signal over to the muscle spindle. And the Golgi tendon organ will turn off the muscle spindle and allow your muscle to actually relax into a further length. And that's why if you hold a stretch for about 30 seconds, you'll feel it kind of relax. And you're like, well, and you can kind of stretch a little bit further, right? That process is called autogenic inhibition. You are inhibiting the muscle spindle by putting pressure on these little Golgi tendon organs. How'd you put pressure on them? You pulled them end to end. Or you could always place a foam roller here, or get a massage, place a thumb there, right? You can always put pressure on a Golgi tendon organ by actively pressing on it as well, right? So it's the process where pressure on a Golgi tendon organ creates an inhibitory effect on our muscles. That's a static stretch. It's a really good way to improve your flexibility. However, one of the problems with it is that it inhibits your muscles, which is both good to give us mobility and bad to give us strength. So you don't want to do static stretches before heavy lifting because it will actually reduce your overall strength. And it can even result in you like using bad form to try to get a lift done. And then it can sometimes be associated with an increased risk of injury. But we love static stretches if you're lifting light. If you're doing like long endurance type activity, static stretches are a fantastic tool for lengthening out your muscles. Or if you're stretching on your off days, fantastic way to relax the muscles. Now, another version of stretching is if we had two muscles on either side of a joint, you know, something kind of like this. And I've got one muscle over here. And I got another muscle over here. And I got another one here. Kind of bulgy. Another one over here. Right? So now I've got two opposite muscles. One wants to pull this way and the other one wants to pull this way. These are total opposites of one another, right? Well, one of the other kind of cool things that your nervous system will naturally do is if I try to pull this way, my nervous system will send a signal down to this muscle that'll send an inhibitory signal to allow it to relax. So it will actually naturally relax and lengthen. So when I shorten this muscle fiber, let's say I pull like this towards its center and shorten it, then this muscle fiber will naturally lengthen. Okay, it's designed to do that. And then if I did the exact opposite, like let's say I contracted this muscle this way, well then this one would lengthen. It would relax, right? So I contract my biceps, my triceps relaxes. I contract my triceps, my bicep relaxes. That process is called reciprocal inhibition, okay? And so we can take advantage of reciprocal inhibition. I can tell my nervous system to turn this off by actively contracting this muscle. So let's say I've got a really tight muscle over here and I want it to shut up. I want it to relax. I'll spend time contracting this muscle here. That will draw this muscle into a stretch. If I want my tricep to relax, I'll actively contract my bicep. I'll squeeze my elbow down like that, relax it, squeeze it down like that, and then relax it. I might do several repetitions of that, right? And if I do multiple repetitions in a row, I'm sending these relax signals over and over and over again. So we call that an active stretch. An active stretch is a stretch that you perform a muscle through its eccentric range of motion. You lengthen it by contracting its antagonist. You contract the exact opposite. You do this for about 1 to 2 seconds at a time, anywhere from about 5 to 10 reps. So I would do 5 to 10 reps where I squeeze my bicep, squeeze my bicep, squeeze my bicep, and I'd hold that for about 1 to 2 seconds each time. By contracting the antagonist, you will draw that muscle through its complete range of motion and create that reciprocal inhibition that we're talking about. So this is a process of contracting an agonist, which sends an inhibitory signal to its antagonist. And then we've got dynamic stretches. Dynamic stretches include using strength and momentum to draw a muscle through its full range of motion. This is not so much about making a muscle more flexible. This is in fact actually making a muscle more turned on. You're actively activating a muscle, right? So this uses that stretch shortening cycle that I mentioned earlier. You rapidly stretch the muscle, it naturally wants to spring back the other way. So dynamic stretches are really good because they actually turn your body on. This is the type of stretch that you want to do if you are trying to be more explosive or more heavy lifting. If you want that really heavy strength, dynamic stretches are going to make that easier to do. And then there's a little bit of extra stuff at the end of this PowerPoint here where we're going to talk about PNF stretching. This is what Mo's going to teach you guys in Capstone. But PNF stretching basically is putting the static stretching and the active stretching together. Static stretching was the autogenic inhibition where I put pressure here and that causes this to relax, right? And then reciprocal inhibition is where I contract this one, which causes this one to relax, right? Well, if I put those two together, right, I will end up doing what we call PNF stretching. It stands for proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. Nobody's going to call it that, but PNF. And it's stretches that apply or that require a partner to actively stretch a participant by some combination of alternating between contracting and relaxing. And so what happens is a partner will draw the muscle through its complete range of motion for 20 to 30 seconds, just like we would in a static stretch. And then afterwards, we would have that person contract for about 7 to 15 seconds, just like we would in an active stretch. And then we would repeat that for 1 to 3 repetitions, 1 to 3 rounds. So you can see here, he's actively contracting her calf muscle, using his forearm to push this back into dorsiflexion, stretching out that calf. He's going to hold it for about 20 to 30 seconds. And then she's going to isometrically contract her calf and shin for about 20 to 25% maximum effort for anywhere from 3 to 15 seconds. NASA will say 7 to 15 seconds, by the way. So he'll hold that for 7 to 15 seconds. Then he'll tell her to relax. And then he will actually actively move her into a deeper range of motion for about 20 to 30 seconds and repeat. There's a couple examples of this that we've got listed here. That's how to do the lats. That's how to do the chest. That's how to do the hamstrings, the glutes, and the adductor magnus, piriformis, adductor longus. So there's a couple different versions of PNFs that are listed there at the end. Those are all pictures from your corrective exercise textbook, and we'll get into those later. But hopefully that gave you a pretty good rundown. Last 2 days, we've looked a lot at how to train for cardio. We've looked a lot at how to train for strength and muscle. And we're not just leaving these concepts alone. We are going to come back to this directly in our program design class, and it'll all be broken down in the NASM style rules, much easier to understand, and it will do all of this physiology consideration for you guys. But hopefully when we get there, all of this stuff will sound much, 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 much more familiar. And that's about it, guys. A bit of a long one again today. But any questions, comments, concerns on any of that? Say goodbye from Spokane. Speaking of working on Golgi tendon organs.
That's exactly
No
what I'm
question.
doing.
Right? Yeah, I believe
That's
it.
what we're doing.
That's awesome.
Thanks, Brad. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too, Alan. All right, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Fly safe. I imagine you're back on Monday. Everybody else, have a great weekend. Stay safe out there. It's going to rain again. Don't get flooded out. And I'll see you guys Monday.
See you Monday. Bye.
Oh, and if you guys are behind on any homeworks, catch up on them the weekend. Knock them out before Monday. That's the trick. All right. See you later, guys. Be good, Gerald. Later.